Hello friends, in this video we're taking a look at the Oregon State Child Support Calculator. This is a calculator that can be used to determine how much child support each parent is obligated to in a shared custody arrangement. The child support calculator is hosted on this website, and I'm going to put the link to this website in the description of this video. A few things about this support calculator before we go into the actual calculations. One is, of course, the disclaimer that the calculator provides an estimate and it's not a guarantee of the amount of child support that will be ordered. In many situations, this is just good as it is, but in many situations, the judge may modify it upward or downward depending on certain scenarios that the simple calculator does not cover. The end authority is with the judge or the court, and that's exactly what determines what the child support is going to be. The judge, the court, the administrator, or whichever person or entity is involved in making that decision in your case. And one thing that is really good about Oregon child support laws is that the amount of time each parent spends with the kids is factored into the calculation. Many states don't do that. Many states just assume that the child lives primarily with one parent and the other parent gets just very few overnights a year. So therefore, for those other states, they don't pay much attention into dividing up the obligation that way. They just assume that the child lives primarily with one parent. Even though nowadays situations is different, and nowadays courts tend to favor 50-50 custody by default, but even then their child support calculators are pretty much based on the old standard, which is that the child lives primarily with one parent and the other parent just gets visitation. So it doesn't really matter how much time the child spends with the other parent, because it is assumed that the non-custodial parent does not really make any expenses on the child. In the case of Oregon, they've factored in the amount of time the child lives with each parent, which is excellent. They also have a parenting time calculator where you would enter your visitation schedule and it'll tell you exactly how many nights the child lives with you versus the other parent. That's good. You feel free to go and take a look at that if you want. Let's jump into the child support calculator and enter some numbers. This is where you enter all the numbers. Now, before we start entering numbers, I do want to make sure that you understand the basic concept of child support. I have a video that I'm going to add a link to right about here in the video where you can go take a look at the basic concepts of why child support exists and why we're even entering the parents' incomes here. Why does total income matter and how it is split, and what is a ratio of incomes and how is that used to divide up the various expenses. It also talks about what is covered in basic obligation, what is not covered in basic, what are extra expenses, how to factor in daycare expenses, how to factor in expenses that one parent makes explicitly and how they're paid back by the other parent. All that stuff is explained in that other video that I've linked. I encourage you to go take a look at that, because then you will really understand why we're plugging in these numbers. And then when we look at the output of this, that'll even make more sense if you first understand why this whole concept of dividing up based on the parents' incomes exists. So assuming you've taken a look at that, or assuming that you understand that already, we can proceed in this. Enter the parents' names and relationships. So let's say, we'll say the first column here is the father, the second column is the mother. And so let's just enter dad's name is, say, dad's name is dad and mom's name is mom. And the third column is for a caretaker. If you have a caretaker take care of the child and not the dad or the mom, in this case, we're just going to assume it's the dad and the mom, between which the time is split. And so the system knows who's the father and who's the mother. This is the father, this is the mother, and this was the option for caretaker or state. In this case, we're not going to bother about that. And this is also an option. Is it only for minor children? Is it for only child attending school, or is it for both both the cases here. In this case, let's just go with minor children only. Of course, modify this to your situation. And if you click on this more button, more link, it'll explain to you exactly what to select in your situation. Let's go here, enter each parent's gross monthly income. Let's just say the father earns monthly 5,000 and the mother earns 4,000. Just for an example, just go with that. Enter the amount of spousal support owed to each parent by anyone. This is definitely possible, maybe from a previous marriage, or maybe even, for whatever reason, if spousal support is owed to each parent by anyone, then you enter that here. Or if either of the parent owes spousal support to the other, then you enter that here. In this case, we're going to not worry too much about that. Enter each parent's union dues. If you have a profession in which this is applicable, then go ahead and enter that. In this case, we're going to skip that as well. Let's go to the children. So joint minor children. These are the children that are joint. So these are the children for whom we're calculating the child support. Let's say they have only one child and it's a boy and his name is Boy. This is where the parenting time calculation comes into account. Let's suppose that the custody arrangement is such that the child lives with dad alternate weekends. So that's Friday night to Monday morning on the alternate weekends, which means that in every 2 weeks, the dad gets 3 overnights with the child. And since we have 52 weeks in a year, almost, so we can say it's 26 times 3, which is 78 overnights with the dad. And if I press tab, it'll scroll up, but when you go back down, it shows that it has computed that. That means that the overnights with mom is 287. You can change this number and it'll have a leftover remaining overnights here, but in this case, let's just say the child lives with either dad or mom and with nobody else. Let's add this child, and it scrolls up by itself, so let's come down. Enter childcare costs paid by the parent or caretaker for the joint minor children who are under 13 or disabled. There are some maximum allowed limits, and you can check those here. But in this case, let's say since both parents work, that the child, when he returns from school, he then goes to an aftercare facility and spends a few hours there until the mom picks him up from school. Since the child lives with the mom on the weekdays, then the mom goes and picks him up from aftercare, maybe the Fridays on which dad is supposed to pick him up. The dad goes and picks him up from aftercare. But let's say that the mom is the one who pays the aftercare directly, and let's say the cost of aftercare is $200 a month. So the mom pays the $200 a month directly to aftercare, and the dad does not pay the aftercare, just mom pays them directly. And why this is being entered here is because mom will then get credit, because every expense on the child is shared. If any parent pays the entire amount of any expense, then they get credit for that portion that they're not obligated to pay. And we'll see how this is taken into account later on. So let's say enter the amount of disabled or retired parents' Social Security veterans benefit paid to a child. In this case, let's leave that out. Select the number of non-joint children for each parent. Let's keep it simple and leave that out as well. Let's say this is the only child that the two have together, and there is no other child in the picture. Healthcare coverage. Enter the cost the parent pays for their own healthcare coverage. If not available, enter 0. So let's say the father pays, since the father is fully employed, maybe he gets rebate, and he pays maybe out of his paycheck, he pays $100 every month. And the mother, out of her paycheck, maybe she pays $70 every month. Does the parent have healthcare coverage available for the joint children? Maybe the father is able to include the child in his insurance, and then enter the parent's out-of-pocket cost to enroll the joint children. So since the father can enroll the child in his insurance, let's say he has to pay an additional $20 for the child to cover him in his insurance. The mother does not include the child in her insurance. Let's continue. Based on the parent's incomes, it will be reasonable for the parents to pay up to $353 per month to provide insurance. That's fine. If you're paying out of pocket, that's fine. But in this case, since we said the employer covers it, it just says this amount is allowed. But in this case, the dad does not have to pay that much. Cash medical support. Do you want cash medical support to accrue whenever the obligor does not provide appropriate private health coverage? Sure, we can say yes or no, and based on that, it'll factor that into account. Let's say in this case, as I said, let's not complicate this example. Let's just say no. Continue. Now it is done. It is pretty much computed based on all those answers, and what we will see now, I'm going to click a button and it's going to show you the actual worksheets that it used to compute this amount. This amount basically says that the dad is obligated to pay $563 pretty much to the mom. That's basically what it says. And do you want to have an exception to the minimum order? Do the parents have a valid reason to pay less than a minimum order amount of 100? If there's a valid reason, could be financial hardship, could be whatever reason, then you enter yes here, and then you can basically just just explain to the judge why that is so, include it in your response or your petition. So $563. Now how did this get calculated? Let's click on the view and print worksheets. So here you can see what it did and how it calculated that amount. It took the father's income and the mother's income that we had entered, and then we entered there's no spousal support, there's no union dues in this case, and then we said subtract the cost of parents' own health insurance. So that's a deduction they can take because they have to they have to have their own healthcare insurance. So this is a deduction they can take. After that, you can think of it as the net income to be used for child support purposes. Number of non-joint children is 0. And let's go through a few of the important things here. Number of joint children is 1. And then we go with the adjusted income, which is copied from above. And since we did not have any of this stuff here, it did not impact the adjusted income from what it was here. Now here's the important number, 8830, and this is what you'll see in that other video that I was talking about, where you take the combined income, because both parents are obligated to pay for their child. You take the combined income from this, you take each parent's income that contributes to this combined income, and based on that you compute a ratio. So the father's percent of this total income is 55.49 and the mother's is 44.51, and therefore the ratio of incomes is 55.49 to 44.51. Let's say 55 to 44. That's the income ratio, and then this income ratio becomes very, very important because it's going to be used to split all expenses going forward. So in this case, income available for support, this is basically it just says, right, subtract the 1241 self-support reserve from each parent's adjusted income, and then you enter that here. So basically this is just for self-support, you let each parent have this much amount for their own self. This becomes the the income available for support. That's how they call it. Then based on that, they use a formula. If the joint income is 8830, and for this child that we mentioned is below 13 years of age, this becomes the support obligation, the basic support obligation. And this is what the courts are saying is reasonable for the basic living expenses for a child who is below 13 years of age and is reasonably healthy and whose parents together make $8,830 a month. Now, since this is the basic child support, it will be split. This is the obligation that applies to both parents together. Therefore, it will be split in the ratio of the incomes. If you split 1010 between these two parents, so 55.49% of 1010 is 560, and the mother's obligation is 449. So the father is obligated for $560 of the total basic obligation, and the mother is obligated to $449. Now that's not it. We still have a little more here to go. Here are some more calculations that said income available for childcare costs. Remember, we did this and we adjusted this a little bit. And the childcare costs for joint children. This, remember, we had said that the mother spends $200 by paying the aftercare directly. This is the $200 here that now she's going to get credit for. In this particular section, the childcare costs, it takes the $200, which is the joint responsibility of both the parents, and says now this must be split in the same income ratio as we calculated above, which was like 55-45 or 55 and a half and 44 and a half. So let's go back down, split this into 55 and a half and 44 and a half, and it comes out to be 110.98 and 89.02. And then what you do is you add this 110.98 in the basic obligation we had computed. I'm going to scroll back a little bit. The basic obligation that we had computed was $560 for the dad, and you add 110.98 and you get 671.43. So that becomes the obligation, which is the basic obligation and the after the child care obligation together becomes that. Now, healthcare coverage. It has been asserted that $20 is all that both parents together pay to include the child in the dad's insurance. The dad pays it, but it's still the obligation of both parents, and $20 is what is being paid. So again, this $20 will then be added to the total obligation that is required, and then it goes here, it says the dad pays $20, and again you split the $20 obligation between the parents in the ratio, and this is a slightly modified ratio because they took into account the healthcare costs, but it's about the same. And this comes out to be 11.1 and 8.9. You add that again to we're still counting up the total costs. So we add that to the total cost. We're here now. So 682.53 and 547.47. We opted no to cash medical support amount, so that's 0. So now credits. Now that we've determined the amount each parent is obligated to, now we determine the credits that each parent can deduct because they've paid something directly. So the dad paid his $20, and the mom paid her aftercare, and then there were other adjustments above as well. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the 78, the average number of overnights, and we look at the this is where the credits are. So 78 is the total number of overnights that are spent with the dad, and 287 is the total number of overnights that is spent with the mom. And this comes out to be 9.9% for the father and 90% for the mother. Based on this, you just multiply the basic support obligation by the number of joint children, and it comes out to be this. Remember, the basic obligation was 1010, which was here, and this 1010 is now being split between the parents based on how much time the child lives with each. So basically what this is asserting is that because the child lives 9.9% of the year with the father, and because it is expected that $1,010 are spent on the child every month, therefore the father must be spending $99.99 a month on the child, because if the child lives with the father, then the expenses the father makes are estimated to be that. Of course, there is no guarantee that it's exactly that amount. Definitely not. But we're just talking about estimates for the purposes of calculation. Now we come down here, we talked about the credit. The father gets credit for $20 since he already paid that. And then who should pay support? Then what you do is you then divide each parent's portion of the basic support obligation by the total number of joint children, which is just 1. So basically it's the same amount. And then you can calculate the net obligation using the calculation above. And then it turns out to be that it is the father, because his amount is positive, the mother's amount is negative. He's supposed to pay for the child. He's supposed to pay the other parent for the child. Here are some more calculations. Some minimum order reduction for benefits paid to the child, since we claim that none of that was applicable, so it's just a basic calculation here. We won't go through each and every item here, but basically it is plugging all the numbers in, and after that comes out to be cash child support for minor children. From dad is 563, from mom is 0, based on the fact that the child lives with the mom most of the time, and we factored in all the credits. So 563 here, total child support payable by the father. And this is if the parents agreed on a child support amount, then based on certain maximums, the court may adjust it. In this case, it is not applicable. And here is the final amount. Support for the minor children. The monthly guideline support amount for dad is 563. Now it is important to say this calculation summary is not in order. This is only a calculation summary. What you do is you take this worksheet and then you attach it to your petition, or another form of this worksheet to your petition. Basically, this just gives you the actual amount based on whatever numbers you've entered. If you've entered all the numbers accurately, then this number would be pretty much accurate. But many times you have to take into account other considerations that you can only present in front of a judge, and then that number may go up or down a little bit. This is the 563 that is calculated, and based on the answers that we provided, you can see all this just got filled in by this calculator. So this calculator is very useful, and this way you can get an idea of how much child support, in this case, the dad is to pay to the mom. Feel free to modify these numbers based on your situation, and you will be able to come out with an estimate. Now, of course, it's a good idea to involve an attorney before finalizing this, because the attorney might be able to point out any mistakes, or might be able to tell you that if this certain situation you're asking for to be accepted is likely to be accepted by a judge or not. So it's always a good idea to consult with an attorney but this is an excellent starting point that does a lot of the work for you. So you don't have to, so you can focus your time and money on getting the real advice from the attorney and not have the attorney go through all of this for you, right? So in the end, I hope this video was helpful to you, and I will put a link to this URL in the description. And if you like this video, if you found it helpful, please like it, and please subscribe to my channel because I come up with other videos as well. And do please look at the other video I talked about child support calculation and why it exists, because after viewing that, I'm sure whatever we saw here will become much more clear. I wish you well. Thank you.